Yeah, okay, I'll start by introducing myself. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today. We're excited about this session and engaging with you. And we're going to talk about the Purposeful Learning Check and how you can use that as a model for making these small, iterative, but powerful changes to your course. Before we get into any more of that context, just about myself briefly, Vice President for Learning Design and Inclusivity at O'Donnell Learn. And I've been in that role now for coming on 3 years. Before that, 25 years where I worked in the Cal State system, originally going up through the faculty ranks as a faculty developer at the campus level, and then at the system level. Name the topic, and I've worked with people on it. I've worked on myself as an instructor as well. And so we're excited to share with you this framework that attaches to so many efforts that people do as they go to prepare and deliver their courses. I'll stop there and turn it over to Carrie.
Hi, guys. I'm Carrie O'Donnell, founder of O'Donnell Learn and CEO, and Brett's partner in crime. The two of us worked really closely together and along with other members of our learning design team to create the Purposeful Learning Framework and the check that we're going to be talking about today. Really excited to share some of this work. It's a free and open set of resources that you can be using on your campus. And we have found in our 100+ learning designer professionals who've been using it with faculty that it's something that faculty really appreciate, and we'll show you later. But I started the company 30 years ago, and we have a true north, which Brett, maybe we can show. Our true north is our dedication to humanized, inclusive, and engaged learning. And we think about how the environment of learning has changed a lot and how students learn in so many different contexts and locations. And faculty have to teach in so many different contexts and locations. And that kind of underpins this whole need for this purposeful learning check. So before we get started, we're going to do a Padlet and an answer garden. And what we want to do is we'd like you to share some words that come to mind when you think of defining course quality. What defines course quality for you? It doesn't just have to be online. It can be face-to-face at all the different formats and modalities that we teach in today. So we're going to use this tool that we use a lot. It's called Answer Garden. It's going to allow us all to build a live word cloud. So just type a word and answer it, a word or two, and then you have 20 characters, and then type another word and another word. Just keep going, and we're going to build a word cloud. Okay.
And I'll keep refreshing for us, and we'll see that develop, and we'll do some check-ins along the way. See what you're thinking. Clear objectives, absolutely. Clear, measurable objectives. Yeah. Engaged. Love that. Ooh, intuitive. Yeah,
love that.
Be able to know what's coming, what do they need to do, how to get things done. Inclusive credibility. So inclusiveness and the credibility part of that has me curious. Feel free to add in the chat if you want to, but that's optional. Let me refresh there. But I think inclusive credibility, maybe being able to walk the walk when you say you're inclusive.
Yeah.
Engagement popping out more with more responses, student-centered, love it, accessible.
Yeah, I love it. The engaged keeps coming out too. Student belonging.
And I see Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, in the background. Great. Talk about that a little bit. Do another refresh here. Love seeing transparency again. You know, I've been really focusing on the hidden curriculum and what that can do to certain student populations. And so how to create greater transparency. Love that. Relevant. Yes, you would hope so. Relevant. It should all, you know, with backwards design, everything should be relevant to those learning outcomes.
Oh, and my little special thing is active learning. So thank you. I think that people learn by doing.
Yeah.
Not by passivity. So that's great.
And we like to say active and authentic, and I see both of those there. That's great. All right, maybe last refresh here and then we'll move on, see if there's anything else to grab onto. And always feel free to use the chat as a backup if the technology is not working for you, or if you want to explain anything, that's fine.
Yeah, that's great.
Fun. I love seeing fun. It can be fun. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't take away the seriousness, the learning that can happen. I saw a great article a few days ago on really leaning into play and playfulness, and how that can be a great trigger for engagement for an instructor, but also for students. So I'm kind of reading up on that a little bit. Okay.
Good. Let's keep going.
Bounce away.
We're going to introduce the Purposeful Learning Check, but first off, we want to introduce you to the Purposeful Learning Framework, leaning into the faculty-student user experience. So I want to give you a little bit background on it. And so first off, we started in 2019. We really felt that as schools moved more to, we had done a lot of research in 2019 and 20, actually pre-COVID, about how you can support faculty to create better online and hybrid and face-to-face courses, and to continually improve and iterate the course. And what we found as we surveyed institutions and talked to the, 65 or so institutions, 70 institutions that we support, we found that schools felt that there was a need for a guidepost for faculty. Most schools were using some sort of a rubric, either a Quality Matters or CULT, the rubric that Brett was the leader of creating, and led the team at Cal State to create, Oscar. But there were, or some adapted rubric that the institution had created. But those rubric-based, those evaluative rubrics used to evaluate online courses were often used for like a new program, a new course. They were used, the process for using them, the workflows are pretty detailed and tricky. And so schools were kind of looking for a more broad or less detailed guidepost for what constitutes effective learning. And so first thing we started to do in our research is we asked them, like, what do you see as the elements of effective learning and how does that fit? And we came up with this kind of spectrum, which is based on our research with and leaders, academic support, instructional design teams, centers of teaching and learning, et cetera. Like the first thing faculty tended to do at this time was shift from on ground. So this is a place where you're really largely mirroring your on ground courses. And many of you have been to our recent survey research, our research webinars, and have seen that more than half faculty today still mirror their on ground courses as they teach online or in a hybrid environment. Then it's kind of like adding in elements to make it more effective for online or blended. So chunking your learning, interleaving brief lectures with active learning, less reliance on recorded lectures. I'm really using assessment appropriately, like for more formative assessment, so that students can really engage with each other and engage with you. And then finally, the 2.0, which is quality and engagement, really backward designing your course, really being thoughtful about low stakes assessments and peer learning and greater student engagement in different environments and modalities. So this was our first stab at looking at what is a spectrum. Well, then about that time, we were so blessed to have Brett join us from Cal State, and all of the work he had done on developing the CULT quality rubric, we brought into saying, maybe we can create a framework that's a little bit more oriented towards quality engagement, towards humanized, inclusive, and engaged learning. And that's simple as a guidepost for any faculty member to pick up. So Brad, I'm going to turn it to you to talk about the framework.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. And if we use a term that's technical or based on a piece of research or something like that, feel free to ask about it and we'll be happy to touch upon it. but we don't want to get down too heavy in the weeds. So yeah, our framework is absolutely informed by experience and research. So decades of experience that we have and across our team, but also looking at what's out there. Some of this goes back to Chickering and Gamson, if some of you know about them, and the 7 principles of effective undergraduate practice. Wiggins and McTeague, we already talked about backwards design. Universal design for learning came up in the tag cloud earlier. Absolutely. That's something that we've embedded heavily. And then also I'm thinking about community of inquiry and the work that folks at Athabasca University have done. So we have so many different things baked into this that are based on real research and effective practices and how those go together. I started working on these efforts in 2011 for the Cal State system and developed the Quality Learning and Teaching Program, or QLT, that Carrie mentioned. And in doing so, looked at prior instruments that existed. Quality Matters was one of them. They had just developed their instrument through their grant program. So that was something that was available. Cal State Chico had their rubric for online instruction that was really well known. There were some great elements there. So I kind of looked at the landscape out there and took those things and looked at them and said, there's some great things here, but there are some things missing. I was already leaning heavily into universal design for learning and inclusivity and didn't see that existing. So added a lot of that into what we developed in the Cal State system. Also, a lot of what I was seeing at the time, and it's evolved somewhat, but still the focus can often be on course design, but not enough about delivery and all of those magical elements that happen through facilitation, community, and engagement. So tried to make something that focuses more on the student-centric experience and that side of delivery as well. So that's where we've kind of landed in our newer iterations. And then, let's see, student-centric, absolutely, from the language of the objectives, the experience, to the framework itself, it's absolutely about the student experience. And so we've tried to really flip things to go from content to more about the learning experience. So this is just an overview of the Purposeful Learning Framework and the 8 elements that we have. And so on the left-hand side, you'll see those that are maybe more practical, process-oriented, but they have distinct elements in them that we'll show you as we go through today. But those are the ones that you could think about more for the practical design elements. And then on the right side, you're going to see some things that are more about the student-centric experience. You saw how we're heavily focused on humanized, inclusive, and engaging experiences. Classes, community, absolutely, what students can learn from each other and the power of that community and belongingness, that it's accessible. So access and accessibility, affordability, all of that's in there. And of course, equity and inclusion. So that's a look at the 8 principles or elements. And then this is a little bit more of a detailed look, and I don't want to dwell on this because it's got a lot of words on the screen. But if you're wondering what is meant by intentional instruction, it's that chunking, that sequencing, that being very explicit about what you're doing, at the modular level. So that's just one example I can pick out there. If you're wondering what's meant by welcome and introduction and why that would be important, those are just some of the tag words there. So that's as deeply as I'll go into the elements themselves, other than some people might be wondering, well, when you talk about humanizing and learner empathy, what are the things that sort of look at the quality of the experience there? And so we have objectives. We have over 30 objectives across those 8 elements, but we don't really like to push those in front of the instructor who's going through the experience, the Purposeful Learning Check that we'll talk about. These are the underpinnings of the experience. We do have these objectives there, and they're there to really index the resources that we have in the background and how we can provide those to instructors based on how they might self-rate themselves on the types of questions we ask them. But we don't really like to put that out there as a list of 30 plus things that they should have to check off. We want them to do it sort of part by part as they go through more of an experience based on what they want to focus on at any given time. So we'll give you more of a flavor of that. So that's one on humanizing and learner empathy. If you want to look more at the assessment side of things, then here are some things that we have related to outcomes aligned assessment and what we believe in to make sure that that's an effective experience, that there is alignment between what you've stated as your outcomes, that those are written well, and that everything that you do drives toward those, and that it's very explicit to students.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to make this experience very simple for faculty, but we want to make it we want to be sure that everything we do is based on evidence-based best practices and aligns well with other evaluative tools and rubrics and instruments that are out there.
Okay, now what we want to do is pause and hear a little bit more from you again. Yeah, Maria, so quick comment before we jump to the Padlet. So Maria says, reminds me of the QM rubric. So across any of the quality rubrics, instruments, however you want to term them, you're absolutely going to see common elements for sure. But you're going to see, with our purposeful learning framework, you're definitely going to see more leanings toward that student-centric, humanized, and inclusive experience, although Quality Matters is continually changing things. And I know they're working on, I think, version 7 this year. So you might see more of that pop up. And they've certainly evolved to add more on accessibility and inclusivity over time. So, and I actually have a document, if you wanted, Maria, that shows the alignment between our framework and QM. And there's so much alignment there. But again, you're going to see a different type of leaning in on some of the elements.
Yeah, and we're and think of us as a guidepost. Not meant to be very easy for faculty to see, really quickly see wins on creating more effective, inclusive, engaged, humanized learning. So let's go into the Padlet.
All right.
So I wanted to start with asking you, are there tools or instruments or anything that you're using, guideposts, guidelines that you use with your faculty and to help ensure consistency and effectiveness? And we want you to focus on the first 2 questions here. We'll come back to the last 2 later. But how well do these experiences help you and your faculty iterate in a timely and effective manner? What works and what doesn't? So I'd like to hear what you're using and what works and what doesn't.
And then just to let folks know, your comments in Padlet are anonymous. And we're just trying to kind of scan your experience here, see what you're working with. There's a like feature. If you want to +1 on anybody's comments, feel free.
Yeah, if you just want to add that you're using Quality Matters, you can just like it. Because we know a lot of people do use it, and it's a great tool.
And I see Oscar, that's the SUNY rubric.
Oh, good to have Oscar and Colt here. Yay.
Yeah.
Those both, Colt and Oscar, are open education resources, as is our framework. None. Well, that's not going to happen for long after this.
I appreciate that. Thank you for doing that. Be honest. That's great.
Love some humor.
Yeah. To see UDL pop up first, that does my heart good. I've been leading UDL efforts since 2004, coming on 20 years now, and there's a lot of power there.
That's Brett's special sauce.
Yeah.
But I agree, quality, one of the reasons we have our learning check is that so many schools said that Quality Matters is overwhelming, and the whole peer review and 3 people must look at it. It's a rigorous and an overwhelming process. And also I think faculty can get lost in the details of these rubrics that have 80, 90, 100 objectives that you have to complete. So, but.
And part of it can depend on what's your purpose, what's your journey. If it's to go for that certification label, then you might go through an instrument like that. If it's more to be about your process and having these manageable sessions where you can grow your course and grow what you do piece by piece over time in your workload, then that's what we feel like we have to offer that's special.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. And as Carrie said, up to 100, I've seen instruments with over 100 objectives, 45 on accessibility alone. And it's just, you can shut down when you have that much to check off.
Yeah, we're going to have a session on, Brett, on the chat, the comment on Chat GPT and AI. We have to have a session on that.
Yeah, for sure.
On that with course design. So,
yeah.
So inconsistent use across faculty, no recognition of using these practices, it's hard, and one of the things we hear almost all the time when we speak with institutions, whether they're our partners or we're just visiting, is this struggle to create consistency across the course, your whole entire set of courses. And that's something that people really struggle with. So let's get into the purposeful learning check, Brett.
All right. Thanks, everybody,
for this. By the way, we'll be discussing your practices afterward.
Yeah,
So
we'll come back.
Starting that.
Okay. So yeah, as you've heard, our goal is to make it more about informed iteration, not evaluation. And, we've done a lot of research on workload, and the number of faculty, 55%, that say they just don't have the time to teach effectively. And so you can't dump a very heavy prescriptive rubric on somebody's lap and expect change. What you want to be able to do is find change in those moments where they're willing and able, and can do that in a reasonable manner. And so that's what we're really looking for.
Yeah, and we created the Purposeful Learning Check as a tool for a self-evaluation. We did all this research that said that faculty spend an awful lot of time week by week iterating their courses as they teach. And we also really learned that, and I think everyone knows this intuitively, but faculty don't design, they teach, right? So what we wanted to do is create a tool that, underpinned by our purposeful learning framework, that enables faculty to self-evaluate and think about how they want to iterate their course, what do they want to work on, provide them with a few resources, get them started. But also, we've been using this internally in our company for the last year. And in the engagements where we use it, we ask faculty to self-evaluate. It creates this situation of empathy with faculty as we work with them, because we're always starting with you. So you've done this check, you're sharing it with me. This is what you're reflecting on. This is what you care about. And it's all about you. And so it's a real great tool for creating empathy between the support staff at your institution and your faculty. So it's based on the 8. We took our 8 elements and put them into language that's very accessible to faculty. So welcoming your students to the course and clearly setting expectations, for example, that's the first one of the 8 elements. So what we do is we ask faculty to look at three elements, because nobody wants to work on more than 3. And as you can see, we're going to work on these 3 that are connecting with your students on a human level and thoughtfully personalizing the experience, building a learning community by creating a humanized and social learning experience. So these are 3 very classes, community, very humanized, inclusive elements that we're going to have this particular faculty member is going to look at. So let's keep going, Brett. So as the faculty goes through the check, they're given 2 statements with a slider in the middle. And the first statement is kind of a baseline, and the second might be more of like an ideal. And then they evaluate themselves along that continuum for each of the statements. So they might have 10 or 12 statements or 12, 13 statements in the whole check, as they're only looking at 3 things. And then we ask them to reflect on things they'd like to change. So after they've gone through a few of these statements, we'll ask them to reflect on what they'd like to do and how they'd like to change it. And then we give it back to them in a report. And this report is really that faculty find very useful. So we remind them of the 3 objectives that they're looking to work on. And then we give them some feedback and a couple of resources that they can use as they are trying to iterate their course. And Brett's going to get a little bit more into that in a few minutes. And then we also feed them back the reflections. So it's all in one place. This is what you're working on now. And when you're done with that, you can go and do it again and work on something different. even on these objectives, as you move along the continuum, you're going to get different resources. So we have a whole array of resources depending on where somebody is in the continuum for each of the 8 elements. So we've done a lot of research on this check. Anyway, anyone have any comments or questions before I get into that?
I guess one thing I'll point out, Carrie, if it wasn't obvious to folks on the last page, when people are doing the slider, there's no score, there's no number attached to that. It's just in the background. It's helping to give a sense as to how they're self-rating themselves on that prompt and that spectrum. And then that's going to help inform us what resources we might align to where they are on that particular topic. But there's not a score given to them. They're just offered a next steps type of resource.
Yeah, and we have a number of resources built behind each of the elements that are that we feed out based on where a faculty self evaluates. So on average, it takes 24 minutes to complete this. We've done a lot of research. We've been running a panel of 100 faculty administrators. We've been running several different panels that have evaluated this and checked it. And we unanimously agree that the experience was worth the time and effort. 86% perceived at least most of the statement pairs as objectively balanced. Look and feel ratings were positive on balance, with the majority rating the exercise is very good or excellent on both functional effectiveness, 69%, and aesthetic, 62%. It's always, when you get something is easy on your eyes and easy to think about and look at, that really helps the experience and moving that experience along. And here's some of the research comments that we had on the experience. So I was surprised at how thorough recommendations were and appreciated having my responses available to review alongside them. I think this would be great at my institution generally and for some of the Center for Teaching and Learning programming we have. So glad I got this really valuable exercise, and it gave me so much to think about and a solid plan of how to address things. And these are the kinds of feedback we've gotten. We test every resource we test as we work on it. And this is one of the important tools for us. So we've tested it pretty extensively. So that's an introduction to the check, and Brett's going to kind of take it a little deeper. But first, I'd like us to come back to the Padlet and talk a little bit about the practices that you've used to help your faculty be reflective as they try to develop humanized, inclusive, and engaged learning. So Brett, let's come back to the Padlet. Does that sound good?
Great. We have it in the chat now.
Okay. Would you say UDL is implicitly or explicitly implemented in this process? I'm going to let my expert on UDL.
I have no idea how to answer that. No.
I would say
question,
implicitly,
Ray.
Probably, right? But
I would say, yeah. No, to that question, Ray, I would say yes. No, actually, it's implicitly, to me, if you're not familiar with UDL, it's there for you. But if you know UDL, it's going to be explicit. You're going to recognize UDL. If you know UDL, you're going to see it across the board on our Purposeful Learning Framework. It's in the DNA of it. So hopefully that helps with the response there, Ray. So it's both, depending on your knowledge of UDL.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that gets to like what we try to do. We call ourselves the jargon-free juice bar. We like to reinforce, teach, coach, help, guide with evidence-based practices, but we don't want to overburden faculty with design principles that they don't necessarily even really want to learn about, but it's always there and always available if a faculty member does want that. So let's go. Which practices do you use across your campus to ensure the courses are humanized, inclusive? I love discussion of humanizing into faculty development workshops. Yep.
There's so much opportunity when you talk about humanizing. It's such an untapped area, and there's so many great, wonderful examples that are coming out.
Love that stuff from Michelle Pacansky-Bronx on humanizing. She's been an ally for us and has been worked with Brett, done sessions with Brett recently.
Yeah. And on this next one, I see Community of Inquiry, COI, and UDL, Universal Design for Learning. Those are other ways to engage. So a lot about community there. Great.
Yeah, you've developed your own online course the faculty could take, would like to learn more about scaling this to reach more faculty. Yeah, I mean, our partner institutions are using our Nectar platform and our tools, our concierge tool to help them scale that, their internal professional development. Brett will show you a little bit.
Yeah. And I still love that AI and chat GPT question. I saw some great things over the weekend that really had me thinking. I won't get into, but just, being able to take written papers and a rubric and chat GPT, the power of how it was able to so accurately analyze things, and the instructor could then just ensure that everything was accurate and add on their own personal layer. But I should stop. GPT gets things going.
Yeah, let's have a whole session on that one soon.
Yeah. Inclusive ADDIE. So that's interesting. ADDIE, back in 2002, I was looking for a framework for my instructional technology MA courses that I was teaching, and their projects that they would be working on, the students. And I looked at ADDIE, and the limitations I saw at the time were around being inclusive. And that's how I jumped to finding UDL back in 2002 or so.
Brett, ADDIE's an acronym that not everybody
ADDIE's an acronym.
Know.
Yeah, it's an
Could
instructional
you say what
design.
It's what is it?
Oh, that's going back so far in my my gray space. Somebody in the chat help us out. This is community all of a sudden.
I know the first one's assess. Oh my gosh, but it's basically it's more of a workflow framework for instructional design. Analyze,
design, develop, implement, evaluate. We've got multiple of them. Thank you. There's only so much room in here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else on the right, Carrie?
No, I think that's good.
There's some good resources linked here. So folks, that's the great thing we love about using Padlet is you can return to this Padlet. Keep it in your browser, bookmark it, whatever you want to do. You can, this is, shared dialogue. So you have access to some of these things like the KP Cross Academy. There's some good videos there.
Oh, thank you for this. Thank you for these resources. That's great. Awesome. So, perfect. Okay, and if anyone has anything else they want to add to this, just add afterward, because we're this is going to be sent back out to you at the end of the session. So
yeah, you will get the recording and slides automatically. That'll have the link to everything you're seeing. So let me just get chat back open. Okay, so let's talk about further optimizing. And this is just a snippet from our data, and we've shared this in a couple other webinars, but just to link back to the amount of time that instructors told us, self-reported, that they spend on courses. So first time prep, 38 hours before the launch. Revising an existing course, still 14 hours. And then 7 hours per week per course. So multiply that times 4 courses, let's say, in some cases. Then you've got 28 hours just planning and preparing, not delivering the course. You've already filled up a 40-hour work week, and you haven't even touched the other responsibilities, duties, meetings, things like that. So we know it can be intense, and this is where that 55% comes from that I mentioned earlier. So how do we chip away at still improving and do it in a way that fits within your workload? And not just the framework, but I'll talk about these resources we have that are designed to actually save time and increase quality at the same time. And we've got some exciting data. So we call these optimizers, these teaching optimizers, and they're tools, templates, and wizards that we've developed, because a faculty member shouldn't have to go to Google to figure out how to do effective discussions and then start from there and have to weed through this massive journey to eventually get to an answer and to a good model and to a good outcome. So we've actually developed some of these step-through resources that help by asking questions about what the goal or purpose of the discussion might be, what's the topic, and then the instructor comes away with the actual instructions that they can put right into the learning management system. So that's one example for discussions. I'll take you live into a couple of these in a moment, so I'll take that risk in just a second here. But let me put it into context. So this is a faculty persona that we've created for this experience. And so this is Emily. And Emily is an adjunct or lecturer, depending on the term that you use. Bottom line is she is an instructor, regardless of rank or anything like that. Emily is an instructor, and she's trying to do her job effectively And so how can she be helped to do so, especially when she might be teaching at multiple institutions? She might be a freeway flyer in this case in Southern California.
Yeah.
So if Emily is trying to improve her course and create more inclusive experiences, then there's a number of resources that she can actually access. And so I'm going to have to back out of slides, and bear with me while I stop share and then share a different window.
Yeah, Brett's going to take you right into our Nectar platform that we have built to. So if you think of the Purposeful Learning Check with the attached resources as kind of the first step, this is the full package, and it's supported by 24/7 service called Faculty Concierge, so that our faculty at our partner institutions can have access anytime, anywhere to speaking with, communicating with, and finding the right resources that they need for what they need to work on it at that moment.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's tomorrow's class, I really need to amp the engagement because it hasn't been happening. And can you help me create some active learning activity or some discussion or something that will help improve that? Back to Emily.
The young quote. Yeah, so back to Emily. So Emily's done the Purposeful Learning Check. She's gotten feedback. She's gotten linked to some resources, and where we can go really deep with Emily and even faculty across an institution is through this platform where she can search and load in additional resources, or we have that faculty concierge that can actually find out about Emily's goals and then load in resources for her to be able to access and go through. So these are just some example things. If she's focusing on humanizing and being inclusive, then a course welcome video template, Emily shouldn't have to create it from scratch. She can take a boilerplate template of language and then re-script that to her voice and her context. And so it helps to just take off the workload of starting from scratch there and gives her a good model to work from. Reimagining your syllabus content, how simple changes in the tone and language of what you put in your syllabus statistically makes it more likely students will ask for help, and significantly more so underrepresented minority students. So again, another research element there and a resource to go with it. Creating a course-specific inclusivity statement. All institutions nowadays on their mission statement have diversity, equity, and inclusion, and their statement related to that as an institution, but often it doesn't get down into the course level. And it's so important that the instructor speaks to how they carry that into the course experience with their students and how that is so valuable. So we have a sample inclusivity statement developer as well. Let's see, learner connectedness, getting to know your students and elements about them, their experiences, their lives, their access, all of those things. Inclusive language, let me maybe pick one to go through briefly. Muddiest point, so some active learning. So that's just, I tried to create a cross sample that could be related to inclusivity practices, but not exclusive to that. So let's say for creating a course specific inclusivity statement. So here's a live look at what that might look like. So how would you like to start your statement? So here's some text here that's just a suggestion. And now Emily could go in and actually type over that text. So now you see the editor pop up and she can make changes. And then now here's the next element to consider including. And here's an example. And you can, again, edit that and then edit these chunks. So you end up with about a paragraph of content, because that's about all you're going to want. It's significant, but you don't want that overly burdensome syllabus. So here you can see at the end, here's the end result. And that'll be then synthesized into a written paragraph. And here's another opportunity to edit any of these. So once you're complete with that statement, then you can actually download it and then copy and paste it in your syllabus or put it into your learning management system. So that's an example of some of the resources that we have there for Emily. I'll go back to the portfolio here. And then also there's an opportunity to contact the faculty concierge for any assistance.
Oh, also up top, go show up top there, Brett.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, so again, we've had a whole panel of faculty and academic support and champion folks that are using this and have been trying this. And one of the things they like the best is the ability to create your own profile. So it's like you can share with each other, with your students, what you love about teaching, your hobby, the courses you teach, what your areas of research are, what your service areas are. And so it's a place to where we can learn more about Emily.
Yeah.
So,
and that gets to, some of you know what faculty learning communities are and the power of that experience. And so we've actually worked with institutions to develop faculty learning communities that go through the experience together related to an initiative or focus at the larger level, but they each have their own journey along the way and how they're developing. So there's different things that you can do to make this not just an individual journey, but maybe a faculty learning community and also something related to a larger initiative. So great comments in the chat about UDL not small teaching. James Lang, I think of him when you say small teaching. Absolutely, great stuff. So let me get back to, I've got to stop share and go back into my other browser here.
we just have one more thing to share.
And hopefully I did not do that correctly. Bear with me one moment here.
Now, if anyone has any questions about what we're doing, please feel free to throw them in the chat and we're happy to answer them.
And let's pick up where we left off and get to the final stretch here and then see what other comments people might have after you see some additional information. So I saw the comment about the time savings. It's great that you tell people how much time something might take going into it, but we also have done a lot of research on these optimizers and how we're looking at saving time and increasing quality. And the ideal is that upper left 20%, 21%, where you see that they rated it was much higher quality, the output of the resource they were able to develop, and it was also much quicker. If you add those green cells together, where there's at least some bump in quality and some time savings, you've got 72%. That's huge. And even that 10% that says, well, it's about the same on quality and about the same on time, that's still a plus because they're doing something. So I don't push that off to the negative side by any means. That's more neutral or even positive because they're doing something. So you've got 80% here that are advancing and growing and iterating. So I think that's a powerful thing. And if you look at that 72% and the time savings and the quality, I think that's the best case scenario. And you look at the bottom right, there's almost no presence of people saying, well, this took longer, this wasn't worth it, this wasn't good quality. So we're excited to actually have research behind these optimizers.
Well, I like what Tolu Noah said. It's great. There are small but powerful changes faculty can make to improve their practice, and that's it. That's it. Small but mighty, right? Yeah. And continual and iterating. And faculty have shown us that they constantly want to iterate. They want to improve their practice, and our goal is to make it easier. So
awesome. All right. The Purposeful Learning Check that you saw, we have that available for you. You can QR it, or you're probably on a laptop or a computer, and so you can grab the URL that we'll put into chat for you as well. Feel free to use that and go through any of those 8 elements and find the resources that work best for you, and give us any feedback based on your experience. Let's see.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we do the print version that we have. I mean, that's where people get into a checklist type of experience. We like this better, that it's more about hitting those guideposts and going through that process.
Yeah.
And then just as far as if any of you are out there at these events, we're going to be at South by Southwest. And so we'll be engaging with folks about a lot of the things we're doing, and also some exciting announcements that we have starting in March. And Carrie, anything you want to say about that bit?
Well, we have some really exciting announcements that we're going to be making in early March, and evolution of our business, and we're really excited about it. And so our next webinar is going to be sometime in early to mid-March, and where we'll be making some of our announcements, and we're just really excited to have you join us in the next evolution of our company as we grow and change, still remaining very, very, very true to our values and our commitment to humanize, inclusive, and engaged learning. So
right.
The other thing is that we're doing this Foundry Day with OLC. We're really excited. It's a virtual event that we're co-sponsoring and co-planning, and it's all about breaking the cycle of burnout and charting a path for the future. So it's kind of a launch pad from the research that many of you have seen that we've been done. And we will actually have small sessions on the burnout research and the faculty persona for people who haven't been to those sessions. We'll have small sessions at the Foundry Day, but it's really a discussion about charting a path for the future. And really excited. You'll hear more about that soon.
Great virtual opportunity, because I know not everybody can travel out to these different things. And OLC, Online Learning Consortium, great organization for driving quality online as well. So,
yes, our true partner.
Yeah, so open-ended. Any questions or comments folks have?
Well, that's it.
About the check, about the experience, about the resources, anything else? All right. Hopefully this was useful for you and you have a good experience using the Purposeful Learning.
Thank you for throwing in your ideas, and please feel
Mm-hmm.
free to add to the Padlet. And please get back to us after the chat, after you've done the check, and let us know how it works. And I want to know how it works with your team, like how you're using it with faculty and to help. So anyway, terrific. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.
Great.